welcome to an Auto Intel Summit edition of the Auto Remarketing Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Overby, Senior Editor of Auto Remarketing here at Cherokee Media Group. And joining me is Jimmy Douglas, who is founder and CEO of Plug, which is the only online wholesale marketplace or platform specifically designed for EVs. And Jimmy, it's great to see you again. Thanks for being at the show. And, congrats are in order, man. It's been a big week for you guys at Plug. Today, this morning, you announced a $6.7 million raise in seed funding and the launch of Trade Desk, which we'll get into, but it's an EV-focused trade-in solution. So first of all, congrats on just two great accomplishments today.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate your support.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll start with the seed round here. As you guys continue on your roadmap, what does this kind of funding allow you to do? And, what do you can kind of take a deep breath and exhale. You can kind of do projects X, Y, and Z now.
Yeah, absolutely. So since launching the auction at the start of last year, we've been on a journey of hypothesis, validating, and invalidating, just like any seed stage startup that's going through its journey of finding product market fit. And certainly we know that there are wholesale buyers of used EVs and there are wholesale sellers of used EVs. We know that there is a data asymmetry problem and a data accuracy problem. We know that there's tremendous upside, both in wholesale and retail, in bringing confidence into those transactions. And while all of that is true, it doesn't necessarily mean that bringing it all together is a magic formula for exponential growth. So we've been experimenting with numerous business models. And in fact, in the most recently closed month, we had 7 different business models all around facilitating buying and selling of used EVs between commercial entities. And one of the most profound discoveries in that round of experimentation was the Trade Desk. And in the Trade Desk, what we saw was second-time EV buyers who were bringing their first EV in for a trade-in were very oftentimes switching into a new brand. So the dealer that needs to get the new car deal done needs to facilitate a seamless transaction for that buyer, but the vehicle that they're trading in might not necessarily be a natural retail unit for them. So what are their options? They can use the standard trade-in stack of tools around index valuations. They can shop around to wholesalers. They can make an educated estimate and send it off to a wholesale channel thereafter. And what we found was an appetite to take risk out of the equation, but still be competitive with a value that takes under consideration what is different about that EV. How do we size up its functionality and its condition using EV-specific data points? The battery, how far it can go, where it can charge, if it qualifies for tax credits, software-enabled features, and the transferability of them. All of these factors mean a lot to that first-time EV buyer when their vehicle is being evaluated. And most dealers aren't equipped to do that across every single EV make, but we are because it's all we do. So the impetus for this was using the strength of the auction that we had already built, that's all ours, as an immediate disposition opportunity, and the data that we harvest from our own transactions to put a confident number on every EV at the point of trade-in. So that dealer can take our cash offer while the deal is getting done, and then we take it on ourselves to liquidate it in our own auction the next day, purely online.
Yeah. So it kind of takes that one less thing for the dealer to worry about.
They get the deal done and they get the EV off their balance sheet immediately, and they don't need to think about it, and they don't need to become an expert on every single EV make that's out there.
Yeah,
because it's a different tool belt, a different set of expertise required.
So to go back to the funding process, we talked a little bit about this online. What is the process of from point A to point B of going through a seed funding round?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say 95% of the work happens before you get the term sheet. And I was very fortunate to have start my fundraising journey while living in Silicon Valley, coming off the heels of being a fairly senior person at Tesla, which comes a tremendous branding pedigree amongst VCs. And the majority of the time spent was really on the business model ideation, because when I raised my initial funding, it was at the idea stage. I knew that a company needed to be built to address the mountain of an EV wave that's coming that is currently unaddressed. And from my unique vantage point, having run what was at the time the largest EV wholesale operation in the world, I knew something differentiated needed to exist. But the majority of my calories went into putting thoughts together around business model opportunities and ideation to figure out which of these opportunities has a venture scalable path if it's successful, and also where there's an inflection point is necessitating a new company to be formed. And most importantly, how do I uniquely fit into that in a differentiated way? That happened over the course of a good 6 months in my spare time, on the weekends, through paternity leave, in partnership with some venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, primarily Floodgate, who eventually wrote the term sheet for our first round of funding. And following the negotiation and signing of that term sheet, the rest of the capital flowed in over the course of, the remaining commitments for capital flowed in over the course of just a few weeks. Because when a term sheet is signed by a high pedigree firm and they start making referrals for you, generally speaking, the hard part is over. And for me, it was.
Well, how serendipitous that a company named Floodgate kind of opened the floodgates for you guys.
Yeah, I think they might have done that on purpose. Yeah, their whole thesis, and I'm probably going to butcher this, I'm sure they could articulate it better, but my experience of their thesis was that they like to invest in founders before they realize they are founders.
Yeah.
And that was actually true of me when I met them, and they really unlocked this journey for me. So I'm very grateful for the team over there.
Well, speaking of the Floodgate, in the news release announcing the fund, their partner in Muraco, if I'm not butchering that, said that with the unprecedented influx of off-lease EVs creating an inflection point in the market, Plug is pioneering the infrastructure and pricing confidence needed for this ecosystem to thrive. So, with that, with the amount of EVs that or off-lease EVs that are coming, what are some of the infrastructure pieces you're looking to build or that you are building?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently, a very small number of dealers are moving the used EV market broadly. It's just 2% of overall rooftops that move about a third of all used EVs, which is a really interesting asymmetric market. And what it really says is that there is very low participation amongst the broader dealer body. About 60% of dealers don't touch used EVs at all. Now, when these vehicles are coming off lease, they have to go somewhere. And of course, ultimately, there's plenty of customer demand. There's definitely a butt for every seat, if you will. But dealers are the ones who need to bring customers along for the educational journey, the path to their first time EV ownership, many of which are that used EV buyer. So infrastructurally, in this context, the most important thing we can do is bring more dealers into the fold, actively participating in the used EV product. And our means for doing that is by injecting certainty into every single EV wholesale transaction. When a dealer acquires vehicles on Plug, they know exactly what they're getting and how to properly merchandise it. And when I say know what they're getting, I'm talking about the value driving features that aren't necessarily intuitively deduced by just decoding a VIN. We're talking about how far the car can drive. We're talking about how long it takes to charge it, or where it can be charged, or how it might qualify for incentives. The concept of features that are only enabled via software, and how to tell if it's a subscription or if it's purchased or if it persists through ownership transfer. Because of this new spiderweb of complexities, plenty of dealers have either opted out or have tried once and unsuccessfully and were left with a bad taste in their mouth. So the part that we want to play in this is twofold. It's bring transparency and accuracy to all of that value driving data, but then make it intuitive how that data can be used to make an informed wholesale and then confident retail transaction.
So I've got a sense of how big the off-lease landscape is for EVs, but what about the trade-in piece of it, especially since you guys are launching the trade desk? How big is the trade-in landscape for EVs? Are there a lot of people bringing back?
Actually, yeah. The dirty secret is that there's actually, in our forecast, there will be more EVs traded in next year than returned off lease. So when we looked at this, we realized that as much as we have a really incredible pipeline of OEMs that we've been working on pilots with to start helping them with the off-lease cadence that's really going to start hitting us in a big wave next year, the trade-in component of it is a more immediate need, and it's just been exacerbated by the political landscape as of late. And what we're seeing now is so many dealers that were previously turning EVs away as trade-ins suddenly need to be rethinking it because their new car lineup is more inclusive of them. But it doesn't mean that they need to become a subject matter expert on how to retail every single EV that is not represented by their manufacturer. So a fast disposition option with a guaranteed cash outcome is what they were asking for, and that's why we launched it.
So, you currently work with 400 franchise dealers, independent dealers, and commercial consigners. Obviously, the consigners are the ones doing just the selling piece of that. But what is the breakdown in terms of the sellers and buyers through this platform?
Yeah,
through Plug.
Absolutely. So sellers are about 50-50 split between commercial consigners and dealers.
Yeah.
And then on the demand side, it's purely dealers. It's a 50-50 split, again, roughly between franchise dealers and independent dealers, but 60% of the buying is by franchise dealers. But even more interesting, 50% of our sales involve a cross-state move, and the average cross-state move is 800 miles.
Oh, wow.
Which means these dealers that are aggressively pursuing used EV inventory are generally buying something that's very specific for their lineup, and they're willing to pick it up from just about anywhere, which is really helpful in the case of a trade desk, because if you're receiving a used Model 3 in Indiana, I can very well have a buyer line up in Atlanta for that vehicle. And we've seen that exact scenario play out many times.
So is there transportation partners you work with then to facilitate that?
Yep, absolutely. We work with a few heavy hitters in the transportation industry. We work with AutoSled. We work with Run Buggy. We are spinning up partnerships with some newer partners actually as we speak. And the majority of transactions on Plug that have transportation are generally dispatched by the dealers themselves, and about 25% of the transactions we dispatch for them through one of those partners.
And I know you're sort of dipping your toes into also working with auto auctions, brick and mortar. To the degree that you're comfortable talking about it, what has that work involved so far?
It's huge. So there are plenty of commercial consigners out there. Let's particularly talk about direct-to-consumer automakers that don't have a dealership footprint, and real estate is a very hot commodity. This topic is near and dear to me as the person who used to run North American-wide delivery operations at one of these automakers.
Yeah.
And the issue is the turn time requirement around EV remarketing should always be the most compressed window of time as possible. That's something I truly believe. But you don't always have the luxury of removing a vehicle from your balance sheet the same day you receive it. Sometimes you might need to work through a title issue. Maybe you want to perform light reconditioning or safety repairs. And maybe sometimes you just want to time the market a little bit better because of the seasonality or the broader landscape that we're seeing play out in front of us right now. So sometimes it's the best decision for commercial consigners to have vehicles staged somewhere where they can be cleaned, inspected, and charged before they're sold off to a nationwide audience. And Plug is an online platform only. We have no aspirations to accumulate real estate for ourselves. Meanwhile, there is a vast network of independent auctions across this country who are members of NAAA, who have charging capability on site, who are experts on condition reports, who have robust security controls, but don't necessarily have the local audience for the EV inventory that we have, which benefits from our data component of pulling information directly off of vehicles through the onboard computers while also syndicating it to a nationwide audience of concentrated EV demand. So it's a match made in heaven where we have a regional requirement for parking, charging, storage, condition reporting, and washing and vacuuming, where we handle the commercial consignor relationship, the sale, everything after the sale, the reassignment of title, the transfer of funds, and anything related to arbitration. We recently launched a very significant pilot, multi-million-dollar pilot with a independent auction in Southern California in partnership with a major OEM, and it was a runaway success. And it's our intent to start building out a network of these independent auctions where we can continue to provide this service to commercial consigners across the whole country.
So I meant them too from like a relationship standpoint, and you can come to these auctions saying, "Hey, I'm not trying to take your business or flip your business model upside down. There are things that I need from you that you need from me. We can sort of help each other out."
This is a relationship-driven industry, as everybody here knows, but I don't think you can really fully appreciate the extent to which that's true unless you're really in it.
Yeah.
And the most valuable currency we have is the trust and the reputation that we've been building as we've been getting this off the ground. And what I would say to any independent auction that's interested in this model is there's almost certainly no overlap between the consignor relationships I'm pursuing and the ones that we would bring to the table. There's virtually no overlap between the consignor relationships that we would bring to the table and the ones that you would be concerned about any disruption to.
Yeah.
Given that we're going after pure battery electric vehicle inventory, not even plug-in hybrid, and generally speaking, we are working with nationwide operators.
Yeah. Well, what are some, just from even an observational perspective, what are some steps that you see brick and mortar auto auctions and anybody who's in the business of selling wholesale EVs, what are some steps to provide that they need to do for more EVs coming on board, through off lease?
The most important thing they can do is not let the cars die.
Yeah.
And it sounds so simple, Joe, but it's not.
Yeah.
And well, it can be very simple, but in practice, I've seen that there's a wild difference between facilities that focus on this and ones that don't. And it doesn't mean that you need to spend millions of dollars on level 3 infrastructure. Level 2 infrastructure is plenty. And the most valuable component of the whole thing is controls and processes on the ground so that members of the team can ensure that a state of charge threshold is not crossed and then dip below. Because then what happens is two things. A, the cars get lost because many vehicles are tracked remotely via their mobile applications or their APIs, and that doesn't work if the vehicle is powered down. And then the second thing is that will generally kill your 12-volt battery. Yeah. And in fact, the very first time we tried to sell a vehicle on plug in our closed beta in late 2023, we were selling a vehicle on behalf of a commercial consignor that had a vehicle stored at a traditional auction. And when we attempted to connect to it over the air via the vehicle's API, which is part of what we do, we couldn't. And it turned out it was because the 12-volt was dead. So we actually had to delay our launch and dispatch a mobile service technician, replace the 12-volt battery, attempt to connect to it again, succeed that time, and then we finally launched a few days later.
Well, last question before I let you go here. Today's a huge day for you guys. It's to hit this kind of funding, to launch a new product. We're starting just kind of getting into the second quarter of the year. As you look at the rest of 2025, what's on your kind of roadmap that you're, willing to share at this point?
Yeah.
What's the next thing you're going after?
Absolutely. So the name of the game for us now is exponential growth. And the good news is Plug has been in business, or at least was founded almost exactly 2 years ago, 2 weeks and 2 weeks ago. And 48% of all of the net revenue that we've generated was in the last 90 days. So we're on a very positive growth trajectory. But in order to sustain our momentum into what would be a subsequent Series A funding round, the name of the game is exponential growth.
Yeah.
So we need to do two things. We need to continue to grow our volume and get to the point where we're consistently moving multi-millions of dollars worth of product through the auction, ideally every week. And we need to ensure that our unit economics remain healthy, because when raising capital for a marketplace business, it's all about the take rate. It's great to say that we can sell $15 million worth of EVs, which we have so far, but we also need to take a reasonable percentage of that overall gross merchandise value in order for this marketplace business to be sustainable. So we're thinking about how do we ensure that we're adding enough value in this equation where both buyer and seller would be very happy to support that business model.
Very good. Well, we'll leave it there for today. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and thanks for being a part of Auto Intel Summit.
Appreciate you, Joe.
Absolutely. Thank you. That'll do it for this edition of the Auto Remarketing Podcast. Stay tuned for more from the Auto Intel Summit.